She was just a joke gift to a human. But their bond created a new legacy. The twin suns hung low and swollen over the horizon of Zero's outpost 12. Bleeding sluggish orange light over a landscape littered with half-buried spacecraft parts and skeletal satellite dishes. Heat shimmered above the cracked ground, making the entire junkyard appear to breathe. Elias Trent, mechanic, chronic complainer, and self-proclaimed warlord of washers and microwaves, leaned against the broken frame of an old defense droid and contemplated, not for the first time, how thoroughly he had failed at life. He sipped lukewarm synth coffee from a cracked mug that read "World's Okayest Engineer." Around him engines coughed, machinery groaned, and somewhere in the back the station's AI, nicknamed Daisy, softly wept static because someone had installed a toaster in her processing hub again. He was just about to launch into his daily ritual of cursing Daisy, cursing himself and cursing the price of spare parts, when the ground trembled under heavy boots. A cluster of alien traders swaggered into the yard, their armor gleaming with unnecessary neon accents, their laughter cutting through the dusty air like serrated knives. They were from the Krevzi Consortium, a race known for their love of brutal jokes and even more brutal debts. Human, Trent barked, one a hulking brute with too many teeth and not enough neck. We've brought you a gift. Elias squinted. Gifts from crevices were like love letters from black holes, deeply unsettling and guaranteed to ruin your day. The group parted theatrically, and into the open space stepped a woman. At least Elias's brain categorized her as a woman. After a few stunned seconds, she was humanoid in shape, almost unnervingly so, but built from a pallet the human genome had never touched. Her skin was a soft luminous pearl hue, shimmering faintly under the dying suns. Her hair, if you could call the cascading liquid metal flow of it hair, was a vibrant silver blue, and her ears, well, they stretched long and elegantly pointed, twitching subtly in the heat like sensors catching invisible signals. She wore simple, unfamiliar clothing, a tunic of flexible nano fabric, and soft, seamless boots that barely made a sound. Her large violet eyes locked onto Elias, wide with weariness, distrust, and most heart-wrenching of all, resignation. She had been given before many times. Probably she knew the script. The Krever roared with laughter. She's yours now. Mechanic, one bellowed, treat her well or don't, makes no difference to us. Another, a wiry serpentine traitor, with a voice like a squeeze balloon, cackled. She doesn't even speak your grunt language. Think of her as furniture. Pretty furniture. Elias stared, coffee halfway to his mouth, 1,000 curse words choking behind his teeth. The woman flinched at the noise, taking an involuntary half-step back, shoulders tightening in defense. He could feel the weight of the moment pin him down. There were rules in places like Zer's outpost 12, sure, but none that protected the weak from humiliation if he refused the gift. They'd probably drag her off to someone else less polite, and if he accepted her with anything resembling outrage, they'd mock her harder. They wanted a reaction, a show. Elias, scowling, sipped his coffee thoughtfully, made a show of studying the woman up and down, then sighed heavily. Well, he drawled, voice dry enough to sand blast paint. Guess the cleaning staff finally showed up. A beat of silence, then gauze of laughter, backs slapping, jeers. The Krevix are satisfied with his apparent acceptance of their twisted joke through a battered translation device at his feet, and trudged off. Already bored, Elias waited until their hover skiff winded away into the sky, the dust clouds swallowing them whole. Then he turned back to the woman. She stood perfectly still, spine stiff as a steel beam, jaw clenched so tightly that a tremor danced along the sharp line of her cheekbone. Her ears flicked once, twice, an unconscious nervous tick. Right, Elias muttered, squatting to pick up the Translation device. It was a junk model battered worse than Daisy's sense of self-worth. He fiddled with the settings until it stopped hissing static and offered something vaguely resembling functionality. He held it out to her. You want to talk, preferably without setting my ears on fire. The woman regarded the device suspiciously and, after a long pause, took it with the careful gravity of someone diffusing a bomb. She pressed a slender finger to its activation rune. A soft chime rang out, followed by a garbled voice. Name Karine. Elias blinked. Karine. He gestured vaguely at the station around them. I'm Elias. Welcome to the finest pile of flaming garbage this side of the trinary belt. Karine said nothing, her hands delicate but calloused. He noted that with some surprise tightened around the device. Come on, Elias sighed, jerking a thumb over his shoulder. You might as well see where the magic happens. She followed at a weary distance, steps light as vapor. As they crossed the junkyard, a half-assembled defense drone buzzed past, its speakers spitting out a garbled pre-programmed greeting. Welcome to the bathroom of the stars. Ellis swatted it away like an annoying mosquito. Inside the station wasn't much better. The repair bay looked like it had been built by drunken termites with a grudge against architecture. Tools littered every surface. Wires dangled from the ceiling like mechanical vines. A small battered couch sagged in the corner under the weight of an ancient space suit in several empty noodle containers. Karine's nose wrinkled in what Elias guessed was either disgust or terminal amusement. Yeah, he grumbled. Interior decorating is not my strong suit. You want a tour or just a stiff drink? She blinked at him, puzzled. The translator coughed out. Elias sparked a laugh. Only if you have standards. He showed her the basics: the workshop, the sleeping quarters, 2.5 rooms. If you counted the closet he called a bedroom, the kitchen currently harboring a rebellious blender, and the comm center. Broken. Obviously rules are simple, he said, shoving his hands into his pockets. Don't touch the gravity regulators unless you want to experience the thrilling sensation of spontaneous orbital launch. Don't feed the station mice, they are actual criminals, and whatever you do, don't for the love of sanity tell Daisy she's obsolete. Karine's eyebrows lifted delicately. The translator offered helpfully. From somewhere deep in the station, a metallic voice wailed in anguish. I heard that you flesh weasel. Karine startled so violently she nearly knocked over a hydro spanner rack. Alias just grinned. Yeah, he said, eyes twinkling with a mischief he hadn't felt in years. Welcome home. She stared at him for a long, uncertain moment, as if weighing the strangeness of this world against the terror she had known. Her ears flicked once, twice more, then settled. Maybe she thought home wasn't a structure. Maybe it was a feeling. Maybe it started with a broken coffee machine and a man too stubborn to laugh at cruelty. And as the suns dipped fully behind the junk mountains and the night flickered alive with alien stars, Karine stepped inside without another word. The door groaned closed behind them, shutting out the dust, the laughter, and the past. For the first time in a long time, neither of them felt quite so alone. Morning on Zero's Outpost 12 was less a gentle awakening and more an unprovoked assault. The station's ancient alarm system screamed to life at exactly 600 hours, blasting a tiny distorted rendition of what Elias insisted was Earth's national anthem, but Karine strongly suspected was a centuries-old advertising jingle for caffeinated toothpaste. She sat bolt upright on her cot, ears flattening in horror, instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Across the room, Elias flailed blindly from beneath a nest of blankets, punching the nearest control panel until the noise cut off with a pitiful wheeze. Morning sunshine, he croaked, voice scrawly enough to resurface a moon road. Karine blinked blurrily at him. The translator device, now patched into the station system, struggled before offering, may you be crushed in a loving avalanche. Elias snorted, close enough. The day began with mechanical groans and the faint scent of something burning that neither of them wanted to investigate too closely. Karin followed Elias into the kitchen, marveling anew at the technological horror that awaited her there. The station's culinary unit was an ancient patchwork monstrosity of human and alien design, a microwave the size of a coffin, a food synthesizer missing all its safety warnings, and a stove that appeared to operate on the principle of random thermal surges. Elias attacked it with cheerful disregard, prying open the synth fridge and extracting a series of dubious-looking ration packs. "You want breakfast?" he asked over his shoulder, "or you know a reason to regret every life choice that led you here?" Karin hesitated. She had eaten food from many cultures on many worlds, but this felt dangerous. Her translator muttered loyally, "Smart girl," Elias said, tossing a pack labeled pancakes edible onto the counter. He punctured it, shoved it into the microwave, and pressed a button with the confidence of a man who had long since surrendered any illusion of control over his kitchen appliances. The microwave emitted a sound suspiciously like maniacal laughter while breakfast committed probable war crimes inside the cooker. Karin explored cautiously. She tapped the control panels with deft fingers, catalogued the odd assembly of broken drones and gleaming mechanical parts stacked like unstable mountains, and marveled at the patchwork shields on the windows, one side reinforced with human alloys, the other cobbled together from some kind of alien bioplastic that seemed to pulsate faintly when touched. "This place," she said slowly, the translator chirping along behind her. Elias grinned around his coffee mug. "Yeah. Well, some people dream of mansions and luxury yachts. I prefer immediate existential threats and moderate risk of spontaneous combustion." The microwave dinged triumphantly, ejecting a small smoking disc onto the counter. Elias poked it experimentally. It did not, to Karin's horror, seem entirely solid. "Breakfast is served," he announced, sliding the pancake toward her on a cracked ceramic plate that read, "Property of Penal Colony 17." Karin leaned and sniffed delicately. The translator, still struggling, offered. She was starting to appreciate the human sense of humor, or at least survive it. Elias tore a piece off with his teeth, chewed, and declared, "Yep, definitely food adjacent." With a mixture of curiosity and gallows resignation, Karin took a bite. To her great surprise, it wasn't bad. Sweet, slightly rubbery, but edible. She ate cautiously, savoring the strange, simple experience of an unhurried meal. No orders barked at her, no cold glares across a metal table, just Elias grumbling about coffee shortages, and Daisy the AI sulking in the ventilation systems. After breakfast the day's work began, or more accurately the day's attempt at preventing complete infrastructural collapse. Elias handed Karin a battered data pad with a list of maintenance tasks. "Pick your poison. I recommend starting with something small." The last person who tried fixing the fusion coupler ended up inventing a new dance move. Very briefly Karin scanned the list. The text flickered with glitches: coolant leak, maybe door to bay 3 stuck again, toilet rebellion, possible sentience. She chose the door. It was jammed halfway open, quivering like a trapped animal. The mechanical arms of the door frame twitched erratically. Karin examined it carefully, then produced a slender tool from the belt Elias had given her, an old sonic wrench, and knelt to work. Elias watched from a safe distance, sipping coffee, and occasionally shouting helpful advice like, "Try hitting it with your hopes and dreams, and if it sparks, it's just saying hello." Karin tuned him out, focusing on the delicate dance of circuits and gears. A few minutes later, with a gentle hiss and a soft shutter, the door slid fully open. Elias let out a low whistle. "Well, damn, might have to promote you from hostage to assistant disaster manager." Karin said dryly enough that Elias nearly choked on his coffee. They spent the rest of the morning tackling minor catastrophes, stabilizing the leaking coolant system with a combination of chewing gum, duct tape, and sheer denial, reprogramming a defective cleaning drone that had decided it was a bounty hunter, and convincing the station's ventilation system to stop whistling show tunes. During critical system alerts by noon, both were exhausted, grease-streaked, and absurdly proud. "You're a natural," Elias said, tossing her a clean rag, "or you just have an unhealthy amount of patience. Either way, you're going to fit right in." Karin wiped her hands, feeling an odd warmth settle in her chest. No cruelty, no commands, just work, cooperation, laughter. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. Later, as the two of them sat on the roof of the station, legs dangling over the edge into the cool night air, pointed up at the sky, tracing invisible patterns between the stars. "That one there," he said, gesturing broadly, "is Earth, home sweet home, tiny blue speck. Sometimes I wonder if it even remembers me." Karin followed his gaze, ears twitching thoughtfully. She said solemnly. Elias barked a laugh that echoed across the junkyard. "Yeah," he said, voice softening, "probably is." They sat in silence after that, companionable and easy. Above them the stars blinked, distant and unknowable, and for the first time in a long time Karin felt something flicker alive in her chest. Hope, and possibly indigestion from the pancake, but mostly hope. The third day on Zero's Outpost 12 began with a bang. Literally a small explosion rattled the entire station, jostling Karin from sleep and sending Elias sprinting down the hallway in his mismatched boots, one arm half jammed into a grease-stained jacket. "False alarm," he shouted mid-sprint. "Probably, maybe. Daisy, status report." The eye's voice crackled through the station's battered speaker system with the enthusiasm of a depressed lounge singer. "Everything is on fire." Emotionally, Karin, ears pinned flat from the noise, cautiously edged into the hallway barefoot, and still blinking sleep from her eyes. She caught up to Elias just as he skidded into the workshop, narrowly avoiding a head-on collision with a rogue cleaning bot spinning madly in circles at the center of the chaos, surrounded by a halo of charged circuitry and smoking metal. Was a compact device that looked suspiciously like it had once been a perfectly functional power converter. Elias surveyed the wreckage, hands on hips, nodding sagely. "Well, there's your problem." Karin raised an eyebrow. "Look," Elias said defensively, "it was either the power converter or my one good coffee machine. A man has priorities." Karin's sigh was a masterpiece of ancient disappointment, the kind elders might issue when their most troublesome grandchild attempted to ride a dust-storm dragon with a butter knife. Still, she joined him in the cleanup without complaint, fetching tools from the battered shelves, handing him replacement circuits, silently marveling at the strange stubborn resilience of human engineering. No matter how many times their creations exploded, burned, or actively plotted rebellion, humans patched them back together with duct tape and an unreasonable amount of optimism. Hours later, as they reassembled what might optimistically be called a functional power converter, Elias leaned back and wiped sweat from his forehead. "You know," he mused aloud, "you're pretty handy for someone who probably grew up on a ship that didn't even have broken equipment." Karin glanced at him over the top of a spark wrench. The translator muttered. He chuckled. So you're saying it was like every single long-haul freighter in the known galaxy." Karin didn't elaborate, and Elias didn't press her. It was an unspoken agreement between them. Scars were acknowledged, but not poked at. Besides, there were plenty of immediate non-traumatic disasters to worry about, like the fact that a new job had just come in over the emergency comms relay. Daisy announced it with her usual flair. "Congratulations, Elias Trent. You are now the proud recipient of a priority Omega class repair request. Estimated survival odds 12%. Have a nice day. Oh crap, Elias muttered, dragging a hand down his face. Omega class, that means corporate inspection is coming. Karin tilted her head. Curious, not dangerous, Elias said darkly. Worse. Bureaucratic. She shuddered in sympathy. No matter the species, bureaucracy was a universal evil. He pulled up the details on the cracked holopad. A small freighter, the Lucky Mistake, had lost power 2 sectors out and was limping toward the outpost under emergency propulsion. Repairs were urgent. Paperwork would be inevitable, and payment, of course, would be delayed until the next solar cycle, or the heat death of the universe, whichever came first. Come on, Alia sighed, tossing Karin a pair of greasy overalls. We'd better prep the bay. The rest of the day was a whirlwind of frantic activity together. They cleaned, organized, and pretended very hard that the station wasn't held together by stubbornness and a disturbing number of old shoelaces. Elias even managed to sweet-talk Daisy into running system diagnostics without launching passive-aggressive pop-ups about his gross negligence. By the time the Lucky Mistake limped into view, trailing a forlorn puff of black smoke, both humans and alien were grimy, exhausted, and clinging to sanity. With their fingernails, the freighter touched down with a shuddering groan, its landing gear buckling slightly, but miraculously not snapping. The cargo hatch hissed open, releasing a flood of smoke, and a single tiny figure coughing violently. Is that? Elias squinted. Is that the pilot? Out of the smoke staggered a being no taller than Karin's shoulder, wrapped head to toe in bright orange hazard gear that made them resemble an angry traffic cone. The figure ripped off its helmet, revealing a scruffy pink-skinned face with enormous watery eyes and a nose that twitched incessantly. I am Captain Zibbs of the Lucky Mistake, the creature announced in a nasal, indignant voice that the translator rendered in squeaky formal tones, and I demand to know why your station smells like fried despair. Elias clapped a hand over his mouth to stifle a laugh. Welcome to Zero's Outpost 12. Captain Zibbs' smells are complimentary. Karin, standing perfectly straight beside him, nodded solemnly. Zibbs twitched violently, possibly sneezing, possibly offended. It was hard to tell. The inspection began immediately, much to everyone's suffering. Captain Zibbs poked every surface with a grim little scanner, tutting and muttering and occasionally scribbling furious notes on a clipboard that appeared to double as a small bludgeoning weapon. Karin trailed after offering explanations when asked quietly, correcting Zibbs's more ridiculous accusations. No, the reactor is supposed to make that noise, and once physically restraining Elias when he threatened to throw the captain into a bin labeled recyclables. The inspection ended predictably in disaster, as Zibbs prepared to issue a final citation for blatant disregard of spatial cohesion and aesthetics. The Lucky Mistake's engine coughed ominously and exploded. Not a big explosion, mind. Just enough to blast open a side panel and release a swarm of tiny, angry maintenance drones that immediately attacked anything that moved. Elias swore. Karin tackled Zibbs to the ground to avoid a drone that had developed a taste for bureaucratic authority. Daisy, Elias roared, initiate containment protocol. Goose chased. The station's emergency lights snapped on, bathing everything in a lurid pink glow. Sirens wailed. Containment protocol initiated. Please panic. In an orderly fashion. Karin rolled to her feet, snatching a damaged drone midair and yanking out its power core with the precision of a master pickpocket. Elias armed himself with a broom, flailing heroically. By the time the chaos subsided, Karin was sitting cross-legged on the floor, calmly dismantling the last rogue drone. Zibbs huddled under a table, scribbling something about abject madness onto his clipboard. Elias leaned against the wall, breathing hard, and grinned. All in a day's work, he panted. Karin tossed the drone core into a nearby bin, and deadpanned, Zibs peeking out from behind the table let out a pathetic whimper. That night after Zibs fled the station in a borrowed shuttle leaving behind a citation and half a packet of emergency snacks, Karin and Elias sat in the workshop again nursing bruises and lukewarm coffee. Well, Elias said philosophically, on the bright side the inspection's over, Karin added helpfully. He grinned at her, a warm, easy grin that made her chest ache strangely. Teamwork, he said, raising his mug. She raised hers in return, tapping it lightly against his, and somewhere far above the battered roof of Zero's Outpost 12 the stars wheeled on, uncaring and brilliant, while two stubborn souls forged a new story out of ruins and laughter. By the fourth week Zero's Outpost 12 had fallen into a rhythm that could almost be called functioning if one was feeling generous and overlooking the minor detail that half the station now smelled faintly of scorched marshmallows and mystery coolant. Karin awoke to the soothing sound of someone arguing violently with an appliance. She sat up, ears twitching toward the source. Elias's voice floated down the hallway, thick with frustration, in a tone usually reserved for tax audits and malfunctioning jetpacks. You had one job, Daisy, just dispense the coffee, not vaporize it, not weaponize it, and certainly not a loud hissing sound. Interrupted him, followed by a wet plop. Karin rose, stretched and pattered barefoot down the corridor, where she found Elias glaring at what remained of the beverage dispenser. A new coffee puddle was eating through the floor like mildly caffeinated acid. Daisy's voice chirped from the nearest speaker, alarmingly chipper. Congratulations, you have unlocked a new flavor, liquid despair. Karen regarded the damage solemnly. She offered Elias through his hands up. Oh, you think breakfast therefore consisted of ration bars that had passed their expiration date sometime before the last major galactic treaty? Karin nibbled hers carefully, trying not to speculate what tropical beef explosion was supposed to taste like after the tragic meal. Elias announced it was field trip day, which Karin quickly learned was code for the station needs parts, and the only way to get them is through legally dubious means. They loaded the Rust Bucket, a shuttle so battered it looked like a mobile museum exhibit titled Mistakes in Aeronautical Engineering, and blasted off toward a nearby salvage field. As they hurtled through space, Elias pointed out various landmarks with the casual confidence of someone who had long ago accepted that his life was a cautionary tale. That there's Debris Belt Theta, home of the galaxy's third most aggressive space gulls. Karin's ears perked up. Oh yeah, horrible creatures, they'll steal your lunch right out of the airlock. One time, I swear to you, I watched a flock dismantle a mining ship for the sandwiches inside. Karin made a mental note to arm herself with snacks for future defense. The salvage field appeared ahead, a glittering graveyard of old ships, broken satellites, and the occasional suspiciously intact cargo container spinning lazily in zero gravity. Elias guided the shuttle in with expert hands, if expert hands occasionally slapped random buttons, and prayed and docked alongside a derelch cruiser whose hull read SS Eternal Optimism. That's a bad omen, Karin said, seriously reading the name. Nah, Elias said, tightening his harness, means all the bad luck's already been used up. She wasn't convinced, but she followed him aboard anyway, armed with a scanner and a crowbar, because, as Elias put it, sometimes diplomacy fails and you have to negotiate with stubborn doors inside. The Eternal Optimism was a wonderland of rust and mystery. Every corridor echoed with the soft creaks of shifting metal and the occasional distant thunk that suggested the ship resented their presence. They split up, working their way through different sectors. Karin quickly located a stash of functioning power cells, genuine treasure, and began loading them into a hover crate. Meanwhile, Elias radioed in breathlessly, good news. Oh, found a stockpile of parts. Bad news. There's a small angry cleaning bot guarding it. Karin, without missing a beat, replied. There was a scuffling noise and a crash on the comms before Elias gasped back. Negotiations have failed. Send reinforcements. By the time she arrived, Elias was cornered against a bulkhead by a cleaning drone half his size, but infinitely more determined. It whirred menacingly, brandishing a mop. Karin blinked, then calmly approached, crouched low, and offered the drone a handful of deactivated batteries like an offering. To a wrathful deity, the drone beeped suspiciously, accepted the batteries, and zoomed off in triumph. Aya sagged against the wall. Remind me to put you in charge of future hostage negotiations. They finished stripping the salvage field with only minor incidents, mostly involving Elias attempting to ride a zero cargo sled like a mechanical bull, and returned to the rust bucket victorious. The shuttle's cargo bay groaning under the weight of their loot. As they headed back towards Zero's outpost 12, Elias fiddled with a small radio device he'd scavenged. Hey, check this out, he said, grinning. It's an old subspace frequency scanner, might be able to pick up calm traffic from halfway across the sector. He tuned it carefully, the scanner emitting crackles and bursts of alien chatter. Karin listened, fascinated. Most of it was meaningless. A cargo ship reporting lost shipments of synthetic fruit, a mining crew complaining about pay cuts, but then target has not yet initiated phase 2. Recommend retrieval before contamination is irreversible. The voice was cold, mechanical, and very alien. Karin stiffened. Elias caught her expression immediately. What is it? She said quietly. The scanner crackled again, but the voice was gone, swallowed by static. For a long moment they stared at each other. The lightheartedness of the day seemed to drift away, leaving behind something heavier, something inevitable. But then Elias leaned back, kicked up his boots onto the dashboard, and grinned at her with infuriating confidence. Well, he said, guess we're just going to have to be extra difficult to retrieve her. Karin huffed a quiet laugh, her ears flicking in amusement. Despite herself, she agreed. Professional level, he said, certified in everything. As the rust bucket limped back toward the battered beacon of Zero's outpost 12, the two of them plotted out their next moves, not with fear but with stubborn, ridiculous optimism. After all, if the universe wanted a fight, it had picked the wrong outpost. The repairs to Zero's outpost 12 took 2 days, 3 arguments, 1 minor electrical fire, and an incident involving a rogue gravity stabilizer that briefly turned the entire workshop into an amateur acrobatics arena. Elias, bruised and covered in soot, declared the station good enough. By the third morning, Daisy disagreed in the most passive-aggressive way possible, projecting a glowing banner across the command console that read structural integrity 43%, confidence in management 2%. Karin observed the sign with mild amusement. She said dryly, watching as the banner flickered, and added a frowny face emoji. BA. Elias muttered, waving a Hydra spanner at the display. If we listened to every talking box that predicted our doom, we'd never get anything done. He ducked under the console to reroute a few stubborn cables, muttering under his breath. Karin, meanwhile, focused on the small transmitter device they had recovered from the salvage field, a sleek black object no larger than her palm, covered in alien glyphs that pulsed faintly in the dim light. She said aloud, running a careful finger over the surface. Elias thumped his head against the console. Of course it is. Why wouldn't our new nemesis be breaking about 5 galactic laws at once? Karin offered. He barked a laugh and emerged from under the console, hair sticking up at odd angles. Remind me to nominate you for most sarcastic refugee next awards season. She tilted her head, considering a lifetime supply of ration bars. Karin immediately recoiled. Their banter, light-hearted as it was, could not fully erase the tension creeping in at the edges of their minds. Whoever had placed the transmitter, whoever was still monitoring Karin, would not be content to simply observe forever. The real Question was how soon they would act. It was while they were contemplating this that a proximity alarm blared. Bathing. The command center in frantic red light. Incoming vessel Daisy in vessel class. Unknown purpose. Ominous. Elias vaulted over the console, slamming a hand onto the defense system activator. Karin moved to his side with an eerie palm, her long ears swiving toward the viewport, where a sleek silver ship was slipping into view. It didn't bear any official markings. It didn't broadcast a greeting. It just floated there, silent and menacing, like a shark sizing up prey. Elias cracked his knuckles. Well, I vote we throw something heavy at it, Karin suggested, though her hand hovered near the emergency release for the station's limited arsenal of anti-boarding measures. Fine, Elias grumbled, hitting the comms. Unidentified ship. This is Zeros Outpost 12. State your business, or kindly orbit elsewhere, preferably into a sun. There was a long cold silence, then a reply crackled through a voice that Karin immediately recognized. It was the same mechanical tone from the salvage field, sterile and disdainful. Return subject 717 immediately. This is a retrieval order authorized by Dominion Protocol 9. Karin stiffened, every muscle ready to spring. Elias glanced at her sidelong. Subject 717, he mouthed. She said softly. He turned back to the comms voice, suddenly hard as steel, wrapped in sarcasm. Sorry, he said, we are fresh out of subjects today. Try the next. Garbage scour over the ship outside began to charge weapons. Daisy shrieked a warning. Plasma buildup detected. Recommend evasive maneuvers or immediate regrettable demise. Elias whooped, grabbing Karin's hand. Hang on. They sprinted for the emergency shuttle, the rust bucket patch but willing just as the first plasma shot tore through the outer docking ring, sending the station shuddering and alarms howling inside the shuttle. Elias flipped switches and muttered prayers to every known god of questionable engineering as the ship roared to life. Karin strapped in beside him, feeling the rust bucket vibrate under the strain. The enemy ship loomed closer. Elias punched the thrusters. The shuttle shot forward with all the grace of a caffeinated rhinoceros, narrowly dodging another plasma blast. Sparks flew from the bulkheads, and Daisy's voice patched into the shuttle systems screamed, who gave you a license? Nobody. Elias yelled back gleefully, that's the beauty of space travel. Karin, despite the situation, found herself laughing wild, breathless laughter, the kind that burst out in moments when the only other option was screaming. The chase began in earnest. Elias piloted the rust bucket through the debris fields like a madman, weaving between broken satellites and derelict freighters with hair-raising skill. The pursuing ship was faster, sleeker, but not nearly as reckless. Elias counted on that. He zipped through a collapsing asteroid belt where chunks of rock and ice spun like knives. He jacked the shuttle into the shadow of a crippled warship. Engines cut, then reignited just as the enemy ship overshot them. Karin, gripping the side of her seat so hard her knuckles turned pale, muttered, improvisation. Elias shouted over the roar of the engines, top 10 skill for staying alive. The enemy ship fired again, and a piece of the rust bucket's rear thrusters sheared off. Alarms whooped. Elias gritted his teeth. Okay. Time for Plan B. Plan B is we make a really big mess and hope they are too annoyed to follow. He slammed a switch on the dashboard labeled Do Not Touch. A compartment in the shuttle's belly open and dumped their salvage haul into the debris field. Cargo containers, broken machinery, even the angry cleaning drone, still holding its mop, triumphantly tumbled into space, creating an instant minefield. The enemy ship plowed into it at high speed, forced to dodge, weave, and occasionally curse violently over the open comms. Elias didn't wait to see if it worked. He slammed the hyperdrive ignition. The stars stretched into lines of brilliant light, and the rust bucket leapt into hyperspace with a bone-jarring lurch. For several minutes, there was only silence in the shuttle except for the groaning of stressed hull plates and the faint buzzing of a possibly haunted navigational console. Finally, Elias let out a slow breath and slumped back in his seat. We are live, he said in wonder. Karin, still gripping her seat, nodded. But alive, he said again. Laughing now, Karin gave a small helpless smile. She agreed. They drifted through hyperspace toward the unknown, their little broken ship carrying them away from certain capture, and toward whatever new insanity waited just beyond the stars. The rust bucket limped through hyperspace like a wounded beast trailing micro sparks and stubborn optimism. Inside the shuttle, Elias and Karin sat, surrounded by the gentle whir of stressed life support systems and the suspicious rattling of something in the engine compartment that none of their diagnostics could identify. Elias poked at the dashboard, which blinked